Greetings from the World Health Organization. My name is Chandra-Mouli. In the next few minutes, I'm going to give you a short presentation on comprehensive sexuality education from a global perspective. Comprehensive sexuality education, CSE for short, is a curriculum-based process of teaching and learning about the cognitive, emotional, physical, and social aspects of sexuality. CSE aims to equip children and adolescents with the issues, the attributes listed on this slide. Knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values that will empower them to realize their health, well-being, and dignity, to develop respectful social and sexual relationships, to consider how their choices affect their own well-being and that of others, and to understand and ensure the protection both of themselves and others throughout their lives. In 2018, 6 UN agencies came together to publish an updated international technical guidance on sexuality education. The agencies were UNESCO, UNFPA, UNAIDS, UNICEF, UN Women, and the World Health Organization. The updated guidance contains a wealth of information. A key segment of the document is, of course, the curriculum. And the curriculum is grounded in the 8 concepts listed on this slide. From the global perspective, we'd like to make 3 points. Firstly, adolescents need sexuality education. They need knowledge and skills to make well-informed choices about their lives, to learn how to avoid and deal with problems if and when they occur, and to know where to seek help if necessary. So they need comprehensive sexuality education. CSE has been shown to be effective. There's strong evidence for the positive effects of CSE, and there's no evidence that CSE increases sexual activity, sexual risk-taking behavior, or rates of HIV or other sexually transmitted infections. Thirdly, however, provision of sexuality education and access to it by children and adolescents needs attention. In many places, programs don't exist. In many other places, these programs are not delivered with good quality. And this is a big challenge that needs to be addressed. In the previous slide, I spoke to how adolescents, children and adolescents need CSE and how it is effective. In this slide, I'm going to speak to the fact that there is a rights basis for CSE provision. CSE is part of the core obligation of states to uphold the right to sexual and reproductive health. CSE should address self-awareness and knowledge about the body, sexual health, and well-being. All children and adolescents should have access to CSE, which should be free, confidential, adolescent responsive, and non-discriminatory. CSE should be made available both online and in person. It should be age appropriate, based on scientific evidence, comprehensive and inclusive. CSE curricula should be developed with adolescents and should be part of a mandatory curriculum in a school. 3 issues to be aware. Firstly, there's deep-seated discomfort about adolescent sexuality, which contributes to barriers to the provision of CSE. And to address this, CSE needs to be placed on national agendas and strategies put in place to build community support and identify and address resistance. Secondly, there's widespread misconception that the provision of CSE leads to early or risky sexual behavior. Many parents and community members who want the best for their children and adolescents have misconceptions about what CSE is, what it aims to do, and what it does. As indicated earlier, there is very little evidence that CSE causes harm. In fact, there is convincing evidence that well-designed, well-delivered CSE can contribute to good health. The third point is that teachers often lack good quality training and support on CSE content and on participatory approaches to teaching. This is an important challenge. You can have wonderful curricula in the books, but for it to reach children, for children to be informed, to be engaged, teachers need to be well equipped, they need to be comfortable with delivering the content, and they need to be supported to do this. This slide contains the titles of 3 WHO guidelines which include a reference to CSE. So the point this slide makes is that WHO strongly endorses CSE as part of its guidelines. WHO guidelines on preventing early pregnancy and poor reproductive outcomes among adolescents in developing countries, ensuring human rights in the provision of contraceptive information and services, guidance and recommendations, and consolidated guidelines on HIV prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and care for key populations. So CSE is clearly and strongly recommended by WHO. There are 3 other documents that we'd like to share with you. One is the revised International Technical Guidance on Sexuality Education that I shared earlier. The second is Standards for Sexuality Education in Europe. There are 2 documents. One is set of standards and the second is guidance for implementation. The other 2 documents are about operational guidance for CSE with a focus on human rights and gender, published by UNFPA, and another document on evaluation of CSE programs with a focus on gender and empowerment outcomes. 3 other documents published are listed on this slide. One is about digital health interventions. The second is published by WHO. The second is, again, sexuality education in the digital space, published by UNESCO, and International Technical and Programmatic Guidance for Out-of-School CSE, published by UNFPA in 2020. So there's a whole body of tools that can be used to advocate for action, to plan action, to implement and monitor action, and to evaluate these activities. In the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, over the last 2 years, 2020 and 2021, many schools in many parts of the world have remained closed or have opened for short periods of time and then closed again. In this context, WHO worked with UNFPA to publish a technical brief titled Not on Pause, responding to the sexual and reproductive health needs of adolescents in the context of the COVID-19 crisis. And this document lists actions to be taken to deliver CSE in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, using mass media, digital media, using the means of healthcare providers, and providing CSE outside the school context, of course, keeping all the regulations of safety on board. This is the last slide in my segment of the presentation. And in this slide, you see a parent-teacher meeting taking place. It's one of the parents expressing the concern that sexuality education could encourage their children to have sex. The teacher making it clear that in fact it does not. That children, it does not lead to early or increased sexual activity. And another parent reflecting that children need information to be healthy and make good choices. And what often happens is that people who are not completely sure don't voice their opinions. And that's so important to have this discussion and build support for CSE. Thank you once again. Greetings from WHO. And now I will hand over the baton to my colleague Khalid Siddeeg, who will speak to CSE from the perspective of WHO's Eastern Mediterranean region. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chandra, for introducing the global aspect of comprehensive sexuality education. Dear participants, I am Khalid Siddeeg. I am the Acting Regional Advisor for Child and Adolescent Health in WHO Regional Office for the Eastern Mediterranean, and I will be presenting the regional perspective on comprehensive sexuality education. To start with, let's have a look at the adolescent fertility rate in our region. It is significantly high, especially in some countries such as Afghanistan, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. And this denotes the importance of adolescent sexual and reproductive health issues in general, but also in particularly the importance of comprehensive sexuality education to make sure that we are addressing adolescent sexual reproductive health issues, including fertility rate and reducing the fertility rate indicators in our countries. Looking at knowledge and attitude around comprehensive sexuality education in our region, several studies have shown that there are clear gaps in knowledge of sexual and reproductive health, and this for sure is affecting the attitudes of young people. We also notice that there is a gap on how to protect themselves, adolescents or young people in general themselves from sexual and reproductive health risks and illness. And also there are gaps and issues with adequate access to reliable sources of information. Other studies have shown poor knowledge of pubertal change and other reproductive health information, and this was noted particularly in this study from Riyadh, where we've seen that only 40% of girls in that study knew that sexually transmitted infections are in fact sexually transmitted. A very recent study in 2021, a CAB study actually among males in Palestine, have also confirmed almost the same findings, that adolescent boys and girls had low knowledge of contraception methods, and when they are asked about sexual reproductive health issues, their first reaction was, for some boys, was to say that it is shame. And within the qualitative interviews, it was indicated that boys get insufficient information from school, as we see that teachers often skip relevant topics, and it is more common for adolescents to get unreliable or possibly sometimes inaccurate information. This is mostly from the internet and the virtual world, or from peers and other friends from the streets. Moving from knowledge to attitudes, and regarding parents' attitudes, we have seen data from Pakistan and Oman have shown that almost 3/4 of Omani and Pakistani parents do agree with the provision of science-based comprehensive sexuality education in schools, provided that it is delivered in accordance with Islamic regulations. However, when it comes to teachers' attitudes, the available information according to a survey conducted in Saudi Arabia showed that more than 60% of young women, they reported that their teachers displayed negative attitudes when they posed questions related to sexual issues. The same recent study we have discussed in the previous slide, which is dealing with CAP, knowledge, attitude, and practice among males in Palestine, have found that almost half of the adult respondents agreed or somewhat agreed that comprehensive sexuality education is a taboo subject. And significant proportion of males and females also think exposure to CSE yearly is risky. And also around half of the parents agreed or someone agreed that they may doubt the competencies or motives of comprehensive sexuality educators. So this is, this slide tells us about the controversial issues around comprehensive sexuality educations when we compare the positive attitudes of parents in Pakistan and Oman to more or less a negative aspect of teachers' attitudes in Saudi Arabia, and also the perceptions of males and females in Palestine. This is a situation analysis conducted by UNFPA, navigating comprehensive sexuality education in the Arab region. And we can see from the table that there are issues with information availability, but in general, when answering the question of yes or no, if CSE is integrated in the school curriculum, many of the countries have answered with no. From this table, we see that except for Tunisia, where they answered yes. And this, I think, it denotes that the necessity for having information and to provide information and make it available for issues of CSE in the school's curriculum, especially about the topics that are being taught. And also it denotes the importance of advocating and making sure that policymakers are fully familiar with what CSE is about and what could be provided at school level. This slide here is provided by UNESCO colleagues, and it highlights the successful experience of Tunisia around comprehensive sexuality education. This movement around CSE in Tunisia was backed by the first national law on violence against women, where an expert committee was established, and also they managed to develop age and developmentally appropriate teaching and learning resources. With the increased reports of sexual harassment and violence in schools, they make it mandatory to have sexual education for all learners. Then the expert group was also expanded, and they managed to put in place plans to scale up comprehensive sexuality education in the country. As expected, our region faces so many challenges when it comes to CSE. We know that socio-cultural challenges are very prevalent in the region. Myths about negative impact of sexuality education to adolescents are all over the place, and also there are resistance about the contents of sexuality education programs, and sometimes rather than the concept of CSE itself. And also CSE is perceived as a source of importing foreign ideas and foreign models, and as a threat to the religious obligations in the region. This significantly reduces the social acceptability. And unfortunately, in the Eastern Mediterranean region, we face an unprecedented scale of humanitarian emergencies. And this is in several countries of the region, resulted in disrupting social networks, families, and affected the continuity of health services and social norms. So adolescents, they found themselves deprived from accessing sexual and reproductive health information and services. When it comes to the policy and programmatic challenges, it is well noted that lack of coordination between the national authorities, national programs, and NGOs is very well recognized in the region. And also we have seen that there is a failure of effective policy dialogues, and reluctance is seen to mandate legal reforms in the region. The issue of data is a big challenge in the region, with the lack of monitoring and evaluation programs, and especially the breakdown of data for 10 to 14 years old, and then to 15 to 19 years old. Many countries are facing financial constraints. Funding for adolescent health in general in our countries is insufficient, let alone when it comes to adolescent sexual and reproductive health. Over the next two slides, we will highlight some regional initiatives For example, in Jordan, a comprehensive initiative targeting university students, youth networks, and also school students. They managed to reach a significant number of audience, more than 7,700 university students, and also around 6,000 youth among youth networks, and also around 2,000 school students. I leave you to read the very interesting quote from a mother of one of the participants from Ma'an, and she will explain her perception about what she used to think about CSE and what she realized about it. In Egypt, the Egyptian Family Health Society has implemented a big project in collaboration with the Ministry of Education, covering around 22 governorates in the country. That was back in 2010, 2011, and through the project they identified large deficiencies and gaps in the knowledge of adolescents around sexual and reproductive health, and they provided teaching sessions around the issue. And the post-program evaluation showed marked improvement in the level of knowledge and also the attitude of parents and students, and also teachers, and their willingness of parents for their children to attend such sessions. In Pakistan, Ahang Redgar's example is a very inspiring one, which was focusing mainly on building the capacity of young women and girls, and the focus was on girls and women aged 12 to 22 years through the life skills based education program, which is a comprehensive curriculum moving from critical reproductive health information, prevention of abuse, and management skills, which are necessary to keep children and adolescents while they are growing. You can reach, you can access Ahang experience in the website mentioned in the slide. From the various experiences in the region, many lessons have been drawn. By now we know that it is very important to engage all stakeholders, in particularly what we call the gatekeepers, such as parents and custodians of religious and culture and the community guardians. These are very important to be engaged, in particularly in CSE curriculum development. And needless to say that adolescents themselves need to be engaged actively in development of curriculum, in the implementation of the curriculum, and so on. And this is from a developmental perspective for adolescents themselves. It was found that it enhances adolescent-adult relationships, and it helps to develop adolescent leadership skills, and it motivates and improves the self-esteem of adolescents, and also it improves the confidence that they need in order for them to play active and positive role in the society. It is also learned that in order to scale up CSE in schools, we need to engage the health sector. In some settings, it is noted that it was mainly perceived as the role of social workers and teachers, but we know that when it is done in coordination with the health sector, that improves the credibility, and also it draws political support to CSE, and that is why we recommend that appropriate health sector representatives to be part of CSE efforts at country level. Looking ahead at the future, there are several existing opportunities that we have, in addition to what we mentioned earlier, such as the launching of the Global Strategy for Women, Children and Adolescent Health 2016-2030, and the Accelerated Actions for the Health of Adolescents, the Implementation Guide, AHA, and also the regional framework for newborn, child and adolescent health 2019-2023. In addition to those, in the region now we are also having the initiative aiming at integration of adolescent sexual and reproductive health in national health policies, plans and programs, and this will allow CSE to be part of such initiative. We are also having the regional framework for joint UN strategic actions for young people in the Arab states, Middle East and North African region, and this has been also renewed for 2018-2019 and later to 2020-2021, and it aims at developing framework for young people, and we think that issues such as CSE could be very well represented in this framework. In addition to that, we have what we call the Youth Targets for Sustainable Developmental Goals 2030, and this provides opportunities to address comprehensive sexuality education from both health and developmental perspective. Implementing a successful CSE programs that adopts evidence-based intervention at policy, community and the school level, this requires having an enabling environment in terms of enabling policies, supportive cultural norms and values and infrastructures. But also it has to be a collaborative model, as we mentioned earlier, in particularly between education and health sector, where we can encourage the development and adaptation of the curriculum and improve teacher training and retraining, and also review the accuracy of information and the appropriateness of skill-based trainings within the school curricular, and to support out of school comprehensive sexuality education. In addition to that, implementation should be coordinated across all stakeholders, and we need to give enough attention to monitoring and evaluation of implemented programs. We conclude by listing the references of all the information provided in this module. And again, I would like to thank all of you for listening, and I wish you all a successful training journey ahead. Thank you.